All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. I hope you're not sleepy. So let's begin. The poor thing is also waiting for us to begin. All right. Okay. So our topic for today is Block 1, Unit 1 of Social Psychology. That is nature and concept of social psychology and social psychology related to other disciplines. Our objectives for today will be defining social psychology, describing the nature and scope of social psychology, tracing the emergence and development of modern social psychology, analysis of the major contributors in the field, and explaining how it is related and differentiated from other related disciplines such as sociology, anthropology, linguistics, etc. Now, what is social psychology? Social psychology, as defined by Gordon W. Allport, says that it is a study of how an individual's thoughts, feelings, and actions are affected by the actual or imagined or symbolically represented presence of another person. That means how we behave in the presence of another person, or when we perceive or we think to be in the presence of other people, right? It's like this. No, when you're sitting in a car, you look around before you say anything, or in a public place, you don't burp when you're in public. General etiquette that we follow when we are in people. That study of that particular etiquette or attitude or psychology is what is social psychology. Nature and concept of social psychology. A significant number of facts in the fields of linguistics, anthropology, ethnography, and archaeology needed interpretation for various facts, right? Okay, I have repeated that twice, sorry. This need for explanation of these facts gave rise to two sciences that are later on considered as the parents of social psychology, and those are psychology and sociology. The study of social psychology enables people to understand the dynamics of human behavior in social situations and what effects do these situations exert on individuals, and in what ways these situations influence the behavior of an individual. So I'm pretty sure Filter-Copy and all these other YouTube channels have given this thing, no, the comparison between how you are in public and how you are in a person, right? So when you're eating at home, you're eating noodles and it spills all over your front, you still don't care. But when you're eating in public, you're very careful to see that you're very careful, right? You're very conscious about yourself. That is because you know that you're in the presence of other people. They can see you, they can judge you. That is why you do not want a negative remark on yourself and you behave in a certain way. Now, studying of this particular behavior in the presence of other people or in a social situation is what social psychology is. Now, Floyd Allport in the year 1924 defines social psychology as the scientific study of experiences and behavior of an individual in relation to other individuals, groups, and culture. We move on to the social psychology. We move on to the fact that social psychology is scientific in nature. So far, if anybody has any doubts, please let me know. I know it's a little too early, but still. Go on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There are many explanations that were given by either common sense or literary works about the interpersonal relationships, love, jealousy, aggression, altruism, that is helping behavior that we have, right? The kindness, the helping behavior that we have, and roles of an individual in groups. Social psychology adopts scientific methods, and a three-step basic process has been employed in order to show that sociology is scientific in nature. First is we have carefully observed collections, right? Whatever collections we have or whatever information that we get, we generally tend to try and see if it is true. We try to observe if it is true. A careful observation requires gathering of information about the issue and processes of interest, plus an attitude of skepticism. Now, remember when we had these reforms in our olden times, like during the freedom fights that we had, we also had revolution against child marriages, against sati and stuff like that, right? This is all because people have observed the information, they've gathered the information, they've observed it, they've understood the process, and they were very skeptical about it, right? They did not want it to happen because it was not good for the society. So they were very keen on knowing what was wrong with it and trying to find out everything in order to face it. The second is the ordered integration of these observation and statement of general principles. That means, see, again, going back to the social reforms that we had in our previous century, these observations were done, statements were taken of these general principles. That means in order to understand the particular reform they wanted to do or the issue that they wanted to face, they had to get a general statement, or they needed to understand the general principle of it. So they used to talk to these people and find out more, right? The last one is the utilization of these general principles to predict future observations. So all these general observations or general principles that these people had acquired while interviewing or finding out finding out from different sources was to make a plan, right? If you do this, this is how your future is going to be. If you do not do this, this is how your future is going to be. So when it comes to sati, if you see sati, if the person wouldn't have done a proper way of getting out of it or a proper way of eradicating it, we'd still find that the guy dies and the woman is burned forcefully even now. That is not right. That again is, murder. Can be considered as murder because you're forcing the woman to die with her husband, right? I know this might hurt emotions of people, but according to what I have heard, sati is willingly giving your life for your husband, not being forced to do so. So in such cases, when the person is trying to find out the information and change it, that is the utilization of general principle in order to predict the future observations. Next, we move on to social psychology studies. We move on to the topic where social psychology studies the experience and behaviors of individuals. Now, social psychology or psychologists typically explain human behavior as a result of interaction of mental state and immediate social situations. So imagine there's a fight going on. Your mental state says, no, go fight, go fight, go fight. But your immediate social situation says that, bro, if you go fight, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Don't fight. So it is a combination, right? It's an interaction between your mental state and your social situation. Okay, again, another example would be someone met with an accident somewhere. Your mental state says, go help that person, go help that person, go help that person. But the immediate social situation will be like, oh no, if I go help the person and if something happens during that process, the blame will be on me. So no, I shouldn't do it. These are all your social situation and mental interaction examples. Causes of thought and social behavior. Behavior of an individual as well as theories about the causes and factors that might lie behind a particular behavior and a phenomenon or a phenomena are studied by social psychology or is studied by social psychology. So the theory behind why a person, what causes a person to behave in a certain way, what influences a person to behave in a certain way is what in a social situation is what social psychology studies. 5 factors that affect social interactions have been studied often, and these 5 factors are the action and the characteristics of the social interactions, the basic cognitive processes of other people, that is the memory, the reasoning, the belief, ideas and judgments of others, right? So if you're trying to have a conversation about a particular thing with someone, if you cannot reason with them, if that person does not understand reasoning, or if the person does not have memory of it, or if the person doesn't believe it, or these people have different ideas about it and they are very judgmental, can you actually talk to this person? Guys? Sleeping? No. Yeah.
No.
Thank you.
You can't.
Okay. Yes, Praveen, sir, you were saying something?
No, I'm saying we can't talk. You asked the question whether we can talk to the person.
Correct.
No, we can't.
If the person doesn't have a memory or is not able to reason with you, or you're not able to reason with the person, if they do not have a belief, idea, or they're very judgmental about it, you cannot talk to that person. Okay. Ecological variables, direct and indirect influences of the physical environment. So you're in a function. Okay. You're in a very big celebration. You're in your cousin's marriage. Can you talk about someone's death at that point of time? No, you cannot, because your physical environment around you is, of a happy environment. You can't talk about someone's death that is causing you pain or something like that, right? Or the other way around. Someone close to you has passed away. You can't talk about someone else's happy moments there, right? That's wrong. The cultural context. So the cultural norms and membership in various groups. So you can't, the way you talk here, you can't talk about everything that you talk here in your office group, right? Because here we talk about physiological, mental, and other aspects of a person's life. We can't talk about a physiological point of, we can't talk to our colleagues in a physiological point of view, right? We can't talk about the need for food, for all the intimate stuff as well during office time, right? So a cultural context also comes into play. Again, when you're talking to people your age, you tend to have different norms. You tend to have different rules. But if you're talking to someone who is a little older than you or a lot younger than you, you'll have to change the way you speak in front of them, even if you're talking about that particular topic. Biological aspects of human behavior and genetic inheritance relevant to social behavior. Suppose you go with, you're trying to talk with someone with autism. Their social behavior is very off balance, right? So you cannot exactly behave the same way you behave with me and your friends and all that with a person who has autism. They might take it in the wrong way, or whatever their behavior is comes off wrong to you. The scope of social psychology. Social psychology attempts to understand the relationship between minds, groups, and behavior in three general ways. Okay. I believe the statement meant to be the behavior, the relationship between behavior, an individual's mind, and a mind of the group, right? There's a consensus in the group, and that is different usually from what an individual thinks. And your behavior also is influenced by that. Social psychology, or the definition of social psychology, includes social perception, social interaction, and the many kinds of social influences like trust, power, and persuasion. It tries to understand the influence that an individual perception. Okay. It tries to understand the influence that individual perception and behaviors have upon the behavior of a group. Social psychology tries to understand the influence that individual perception and behaviors have upon a group. Okay, I seem to have repeated it twice. The social psychology tries to understand groups as behavioral entities. So if you take a group, in social psychology, a unit is a group, right? So its behavior is all the individuals behave in a certain kind of a way in a particular group when you see from the outside. It also tries to understand the relationship and the influence one group has on an other. So suppose say I have two groups of friends. One in one opinion has, okay, they have two different opinions. When they're discussing amongst themselves, each group or each argument that a group brings out is influencing the argument of the other group. This is a small example. And I'm sorry about the whining, my Scooby is screaming. Okay, the questions of hostility of the group are how an individual behaves when outside the group. Okay, now the question of hostility, the group's temperament is of a whole, right? You can't take an individual temperament when you're in a group. You'll have to take care of the temperament of the whole group. So how a person behaves in a group or how a person behaves individually or both are studied by social psychology. Now, historical developments. Now, the emergence, we're going to talk about the emergence of modern social psychology. Social thought before the advent of social science. This is what is the first step in the process of the emergence. There are two trains of thought over centuries ago. Now, there's a Platonic and an Aristotelian. The Platonic emphasizes the primacy of state over the individual who had to be educated to become truly social. Now it means, okay, I'm not exactly sure what it means. This Platonic emphasized the primacy of state over the individual who had to be educated to be truly social. That means they had state and being educated. So they thought that state had more control on the individual who had to be educated, right? Aristotelian, this states or this emphasizes that human beings are social by nature and nature can be trusted to enable individuals to live together. Guys, can you kindly give me a second?
Yeah. Before Vasudha comes to give a very short description on this, what Platonic is all about is basically humans are not social by themselves. They need to be trained to become social, is what Platonic is saying. So so people get educated and then that really makes them social. Whereas Aristotelian thing is about by default, human beings are social. So by nature, they are social. There is no external education that is really required to make them social. So that is the main, two different thoughts.
Thank you so much, Praveen ji.
Opposite, in a way, they're opposite.
Yeah. Right? Thank you so much, Praveen ji. I actually understood after you explained. Thanks. So can we move on?
Yeah, hello? You can.
Okay, thank you. Modern names for Platonic and Aristotelian are, so there's a different name now that is used in place of Platonic and Aristotelian because generations have changed and the time has changed. Socio-centered approach is what Platonic is. And for Aristotelian, the new name is individual-centered approach. Socio-centered approach emphasizes on the determining function of social structure such as system, institutions, and groups for the individual's experience and behavior. So it takes the help of schools and colleges and corporate life systems in order to teach a person how to behave in social areas.
Vasudha, I have one doubt.
Yeah.
See, we explained saying Platonic is by nature, individual doesn't have a how to behave socially because it has to be trained or educated. But in modern names, why it is called socio-centered approach, where it is missing. Where Aristotelian, you are saying by nature, people are knowing how to
see, here the name, no, here socio-centered, I'm guessing, is that you are put in social situations and trained in those kind of situations. If you see school, colleges, offices and all, you're in a social situation where you're trained to behave like this in particular ways. But in Aristotelian, when it comes to individual-centered, again, the norms change within the person itself. So as you grow older, as a person matures, they know how to behave in certain conditions on their own. So a 15-year-old person cannot act like a 2-year-old person in public. By the time their maturity level also increases, then their understanding also increases, right? Even if you're not educated formally, there are so many people who I see on a day-to-day basis where they're way more matured than people who have actually been trained. So those people follow individual-centered approach or your Aristotelian approach. But there are people who have been schooled and properly trained who still do not know how to behave in public. Those people are Platonic, right? I'm so sorry. Have I gotten through to you?
Yeah, I understood the explanation. My only surprise is it is named whichever is missing.
Yeah.
Not which they possess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Social-centered approach emphasizes on the determining function of social structure. Again, see, this has been explained, ma'am. Social-centered approach emphasizes on determining functions of social structure, such as systems, institutions, and groups for the individual's experience and behavior. In an individual-centered approach, the social systems are said to be explicable in terms of an individual's processes and functions. Individualism in social psychology has been characterized and criticized for the self-centered denial of others' individualism appears in two forms. So individualism in psychology talks about, again, this kind of comes under your egocentrism kind of a thing. Individualism in psychology has been characterized and criticized for the self-centered denial of other individualisms, and this appears in two forms: hedonism and utilitarianism. Hedonism is any theory that suggests that pleasure and avoidance of pain are the only major motivating factors of human behavior or in human behavior. People act in order to secure and maintain pleasure and to avoid and reduce pain. This is hedonism. Utilitarianism is where an ethical theory based on the premise that good is to be defined as that which brings greater amount of happiness, greater amount or degree of happiness. So utilitarian is where these people are, what you call self-centered, selfish, people who think, pleasure is what everything is, or it is the only reason for life and all that. These are uber rich people who do not care for other people. Those kind of people can be considered hedonists. Utilitarianism is where people think that doing good for other people, living for another person, or random acts of kindness or things like that are the reason why a person is always happy. These are two extremes, no? Nobody is either that way or extremely this way. Guys, any doubts? Guys?
No doubt, trying to understand.
If there's anything that you haven't understood, I can actually happily explain again.
And one more name, the local description in philosophy for hedonism is Charuvaka Siddhantam. I don't know whether you heard the
could you kindly explain further?
So basically, Charuvaka, so basically it is called as Charuvaka's philosophy, which sounds very enticing for an individual, which is all about, okay, yeah, what makes you happy, do it. There is no rule. There is nothing that really, nothing like a heaven or hell or whatever it is. So if you think that, yes, this is going to reduce my pain, this is going to actually do good for me, just do that. That is what is hedonism. So basically it is, so a lot of people fall for it because it appears very practical.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that is why the name Charuvaka came. It is like sweet word. Charuvaka is like the one who speaks sweet.
The song is reminded there. The Telugu song comes with it, and the lyrics also seem to be very much in. Those who know the song will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So that's what
people are acting. Huh?
They're not acting per se. They're like, it's like this. Generally, what religion tries to do is it gives you pleasure with goodness. It is a mixture of hedonism and utilitarianism. But then there are extreme people who think, only pleasure and happiness and avoidance of pain is the way to live. So these people usually spend thousands and lakhs of money on luxuries and never think of another person. They believe only in themselves and they're very self-centered. Utilitarian people. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So self-centered is a very strong word. So it is like this, right? I mean, if you think that, okay, yeah, let's say if I lie now, okay, let's say if I lie now, my friend is going to be happy. Instead of telling him truth, I'll lie. So that is going to actually reduce pain. So even though I'm doing it for my friend, right, I'm really keeping the lie on because I thought as of now, yeah, whatever. See,
you're avoiding pain.
You're avoiding the pain. You're not really thinking that if I lie, I'll go to hell or this is wrong. He's going to be affected in future. All these things are not there. Right now, I'm actually taking the route which is going to be happy. Happy for me, especially. So first person is me. So I'm going to be happy because if people surrounding me are going to be happy in the immediate term, I'm going to be happy. So it is little different from self-centeredness. So it is not about being selfish. So it is about you don't care.
Right?
What is
Sorry?
that?
That is the first one you're explaining, is it?
Yeah,
exactly.
Hedonism.
Yes.
Hedonism.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, you don't care about like there is a God who is seeing, there is a hell that you might go. All
you
these
do
things
not
are
care
like,
about consequences. The
exactly.
consequences be to hell.
Yeah, you don't believe in all those
You don't believe
things.
in consequences. You do what is right for you. You do what is, what makes you happy. Anything that you can avoid pain. You don't care if it is legal, illegal, if it is approved or not approved. As long as it keeps you happy, you'll do it. That is hedonism. Utilitarianism is where the person always thinks for other people. These are great souls who will always work for the betterment of other people. These social workers who do not think about themselves. They're more about, always helping other people. The kind of people who lose everything just to help other people. These kind of people are utilitarianism.
So little different about that particular description is, see, when it comes to utilitarianism, so it's not just about helping the other people. Okay. So the way that you would evaluate any act, let's say you're doing one particular act, let's say you are lying to your friend, let's say to make him happy. So there in hedonism, you are actually seeing that, okay, let him be happy. That's it. I'm not going to think much about it. But utilitarian people, how they think is, let's say if I lie, and if the same thing is done by a few other people, and somebody lies to me as well. So this act is not going to be good when I actually accumulate count across, right? So any act which is going to do, let's say if in a cumulative way it is going to do good, then that act is considered as the correct act. So you will actually accumulate the happiness or accumulate the effect of whatever that you are actually doing with the greater society, and then evaluate whether you are doing it right or wrong. In case of hedonism, exactly. In the hedonism, you are not worried about that big picture. You are just worried about yourself and the immediate need. Whereas in utilitarian, you are actually seeing that, oh yeah, anything which is going to do common good or a greater good is going to be the right act, is how you evaluate.
It reminds me of this one saying, no, you can sacrifice one person for the entire village, one village for the entire state, one state for the entire country.
Yeah, something so that is in utilitarian philosophy. Yeah. So both these philosophies are not really perfect. I mean, don't think as if that
they're extreme.
Yeah, don't think that utilitarian is like, you know, good. It does have it does have its own effects. So there is actually a questionable aspect on utilitarianism as well. At the same time, obviously, hedonism, anyway, we obviously
already know it is.
Yeah. So there are middle paths as well. But anyway, I think we are going too much into philosophy. So we should go to the social.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Praveenji, again. Excellent explanation. Thank you. Okay, and now we move on to the second stage of development of social psychology. Now, during the time where social psychology was branching out from under psychology and sociology, three important movements were considered to be really demarcating them, right? So it was the requirement concerning the solution of socio-psychological problems, which were aroused in various related sciences. So in either in psychology, sociology, ethnography, linguistics, there were so many problems that could not be explained by that particular branch of science itself. It needed a separate branch of science. That is why social psychology has come out. The next was the process involved in the separation of socio-psychological problems within the two parent disciplines, that is psychology and sociology. Now, it was very difficult to find out which problem came under social psychology, sociology, or psychology. So the entire process where it demarcated the questions or the problems that people were facing was also a very important period. And the description of the first forms of independent social psychology knowledge, social psychological knowledge. Just before we can go ahead, we have the different forms that came in. And those different forms were, just a second, your people's psychology, your mass psychology, and theories of instincts of social psychology. Sorry, social behavior. These were the forms that we're talking about. And we're going to go in for each of them. Okay, people's psychology. Now, this was developed as this is one of the forms of socio-psychological theory in Germany. There was an article by the name of Introductory Thoughts on People's Psychology. And it had expressed that the main force of history is the people or the spirit of the whole, which can be seen in the art, the religion, the language, the myths, and the customs of that particular area, right? It was also stated that an individual's consciousness is only the product of the above, right? Or the product of the spirit of the whole, or it was a link in a certain mental connection. The task of social psychology was to understand or perceive or comprehend the psychological essence of the spirit of the people and discover the laws that guide the spiritual activity of the people. People's psychology also considered language, myths, customs, and arts and religion as their objectives of study. So people's psychology mainly concentrated on these particular areas. Then we move on to mass psychology. Mass psychology is the mental or the emotional state, as well as the processes that occur in a large body of individuals who, even if they may not have any common characteristics, are considered as a whole. So if you take into consideration your tribal areas, they are considered as a whole, right? But it's a large body of individuals. Or if you take a country as a whole or a state as a whole, it is a collection of many large individuals or large bodies of individuals, but you still consider it as a whole, right? It is the scientific study, that is, mass study is the scientific study of these phenomena, including the study of mass movements, collective hysteria, and the effects of media. Apart from that, we have the first few textbooks that came out of social psychology. There's a huge list, but I'm only going to talk about the first few that came out. That is in 1897. The first book that came out was by James Mark Baldwin, and the name of the book was Social and Ethical Interpretations in Mental Development. After that, in the year 1908, that is 1908, two books appeared under the titles of social psychology, which were Introduction to Social Psychology by William McDougall and Social Psychology by Edward A. Ross. Okay, we move on to the beginning of the experimental phase of social psychology. This was where your social psychology moved on from a theoretical science to an experimental science. It metamorphed itself into an experimental science, and this was during the period after your First World War. That was after your First World War. Social psychology started becoming a more experimental science. Floyd Allport in the US had served many milestones, right? And he generally compared one of his first experiments were a comparison between people who worked alone and the people who worked in front of an audience or in the presence of people who had similar work situations, right? They did the same activity. It was found that people who worked in the presence of people engaged in the same activity, or when a person performed or did his work in presence of other people in front of an audience, it was seen that their performance had gradually improved, or it was more towards an improved performance. And this particular phenomenon is known as a social facilitation effect. Right. Okay. And Allport published the first social psychology textbook, making extensive use of this experimental research. This work encouraged the growth of experimentally oriented social psychology. Now, because of this encouragement of experimental social psychology, this later led on to investigations in places such as development of attitude measures, your social norms, your aggression, leadership, social influence, and social influence in the sense conformity. Experimental research later on, as the time went by, started going into topics such as social and political attitudes, nature and impact of social norms, relationship between frustration and aggression, etc. From the earlier thoughts of the group mind and depersonalization, social psychology theories at this period emphasized in overriding the importance of individual's thoughts and understanding. So whatever understanding that this one person has, was generally overridden by your social psychology, the social norms and all that. Kurt Lewis is often referred to as your father of applied social psychology, and experimental works due to the efforts of Kurt Lewis put social psychology as a science in a more advantageous position. Okay, he believed that significant social problems can be investigated in laboratory with experiments. He favored the analysis based on individuals' understanding of a situation surrounding them. Then we move on to the middle range theories. This was first developed by Robert Merton. These are theories that account for a specific aspect of social behavior and do not try to encompass the entire social life. These theories tend to be more specific and focused rather than being general or global. Social psychology and other disciplines, right? The main task of social psychology is a systematic study of the relationship between an individual and the collective phenomenon. 3 different levels of analysis have been recognized, which tell us about the differences in approaches of various social sciences. The first level that we have is your societal level analysis. This is to identify the links between a broad social forces and general patterns of social behavior. So what influences an entire group and what are the patterns followed by this particular group is what is seen. In this viewpoint, social behavior can be explained by factors like economic hardships, class conflicts, things like your recession, corona, all these things are what influence your social behavior, and they can be explained. Your second level is your individual level analysis. This is used by clinical and personality psychologists who explain behavior in terms of a person's unique characteristics and a life history. With the help of personality traits and motives, the reason of a person's behavior can be explained. Individual differences in childhood experiences, abilities, motivation, and personalities are emphasized. So they look into your background, they look into the abilities that you have, what is your motivation and your personality in order to find out the differences, right? Then you have a third level, that is your interpersonal level analysis. It is a social situation. It is where a social situation constitutes of other people, their attitudes, their behavior, and their relationship to the individual, right? So it talks about different people and their attitudes and behavior towards another individual. It is used to understand the violent crimes. The social psychology might consider the interpersonal relationship. Okay, I'm so sorry. In order to understand violent crimes, social psychology might consider the interpersonal relationship. So in order to see if suppose say there's a murder that happened, to know if it is a hate crime or a crime of opportunity and stuff like that, they generally tend to see the social psychology behind the killer and the person who is dead, the victim social psychology as well, in order to understand why it happened. Amalgamation of sociology and psychology, that is social psychology. This is, this is what we're going to talk about because the entire social psychology depends on it. And it is also, okay, so sorry. An individual is the basic unit of analysis. However, individual and social system cannot be studied without the reference to each other. Meaning an individual cannot be, you cannot talk about an individual without a social system or a social system without an individual, right? You see an individual, why are you calling this person an individual? It is because you're referencing this person among a group of people. But if you need a group of people, you need an individual. Okay. Now, psychological social psychology is where the emphasis is upon the subject's mental process, disposition, experiences, and immediate social situation. Your sociological social psychology, or your SSP, is where the emphasis is upon the subject's place in social order, their socialized role, and their historical social context. Interdisciplinary versus intradisciplinary approach to social psychology. Interdisciplinary approach emphasizes on the incorporation of significant elements from various disciplines. Interdisciplinary approach conceptualizes social psychology as a specialty branch within the discipline of psychology. This approach defines both the problems and phenomena together with its methods. Social psychological phenomena can be explained on at least 4 levels: personal attributes, actual situations in which the psychological phenomena is studied, reference to the person's social situation or a social position, ideologies and belief systems to which they adhere. Social psychology and sociology. This is the parentage of your social psychology, right? Sociology is defined as a study of society. Sociology is the social science dealing with the social system and structure, relationship, institutes, and entire society. So it is a relationship between your individual, the social system, structures, relationship between institutes and the entire society. It was founded by, the social psychology was founded, I'm extremely sorry. Sociology was founded by John Stuart Mill and Auguste Comte, said asserting human social cognition and behavior could and should be studied scientifically like any other natural science. Social psychology exchanges freely ideas, methods, and models with sociology. Your social psychology in relation with anthropology. Now, what is anthropology? Anthropology is a study of human societies, cultures, and their development. The study of the human biological and physiological characteristics along with their evolution. It is the science of humanity. The main topics of investigation are primitive societies, cultural relativism, unity of human species, human diversity, and human evolution. The theories about cultures and societies can assist social psychology in explanation of the individual behavior in particular societies. Anthropology can give a clear picture of the cultural and social context to a social psychologist. Again, there are different parts of anthropology, and one of them is forensic anthropology. It goes very closely with your forensic psychology as well, because generally forensic anthropology is more about how a person is killed or what made the other person kill them. There's a lot that can be said by looking at this particular aspect as well, right? So it is an important part of your social psychology as well. Social psychology and sociolinguistics. Now, what is sociolinguistics? Sociolinguistics is the study of language in relation to the social factors, including differences of religion, class, and occupational dialects, gender differences, and bilingualism. Social linguistics includes the areas of study which connect languages with the society. Theories and methods from diverse fields like psychology, sociology, and anthropology are used in this discipline of social linguistics, and it is centrally concerned with their methodology. It has helped understand the use of language and the behavior of people in the particular society. Social linguistics borrows its theories from social psychology to draw inferences about behavior from the linguistic data. And that is the end of our chapter. If there is anything that I couldn't explain well before, you could definitely ask me now.
I can tell you something interesting from anthropology after recording is over.
Yeah, recording, I guess, is over. 1 second, stop recording.